All right, welcome everybody. And on today's episode, we've got Marine veteran Ivan Ingraham, who is a writer, speaker, storyteller, coach, leadership and organizational consultant, culture consultant, and CEO of Golden Compass. Ivan, Semper Fi, welcome to the show, brother, and tell us who you are and what you do.
Semper Fi, indeed. Thanks very much, Dale. Very happy to be on the show. Appreciate the invitation. As you mentioned, my current role right now is CEO of a company called Golden Compass LLC. It's a leadership company, and I just retired from the military. I'm literally 8 weeks out of active duty as of the 1st of April, which would be April Fool's Day, which seems to be rather fitting. So I this is new territory for me, and I'm exploring it.
That's when
But
the
we
Marines are
can
going to
get
call you and say, "Psych!" Get
Yeah,
your
well,
get your
with
camis
with
and
current
boots.
with current events right now, I I wondered, I wondered up to the last day. So
Sure. Sure. Yeah. No. Absolutely. The so where are you hailing from today?
right now I'm in West Point, New York.
Oh, right on. Cool. So you're East Coast with me. The and so I mean, how are you feeling about it? How are you feeling about the? I mean, 24 years. Like, well, one, what got you into the Marine Corps?
Well, I wanted to be an FBI agent. I
Right
really
on.
had an idea, or at least some sort of federal law enforcement agent. I had an idea that after college, I worked in a couple different jobs, and it just wasn't working out. And I thought I really would like to be involved in that kind of work. It seemed rather interesting. After applying and making it into various parts of the interview processes, I talked to an agent afterward during one of them where I was turned down, and they said, "Look, you're a pretty strong candidate, but we can be pretty selective about hiring." This is in the middle 1990s,
Mm.
so his recommendation was go become a policeman, go join the military, get some your resume experience, you'll build your resume, get some experience, and come back and reapply. And I probably have a pretty good chance of getting back in. So I joined the Marine Corps in 1997, late 1997, with the intent of doing about 4 years, uh, building that resume, going back and taking another swing at the federal law enforcement career. And I found I really enjoyed being in the Marine Corps, enjoyed the assignments that I had. I started out in the infantry and then became a reconnaissance, got into the reconnaissance community, so became eventually a reconnaissance officer. And just as I was about to start the process of getting out of the Marine Corps to reattack that law enforcement dream, 9/11 happened.
Mm.
And at that point, that changed, of course, the world. It changed the dynamic of everything and the lens of how we view things in the last 20 years. And it certainly gave me a sense of resolve that I should probably stick around.
Mm.
Um, and so I did. And that just led to the rest of the career, which just almost a quarter century later, yeah, it was a pretty interesting ride. It was a pretty good career, good opportunity, and I made the most of it, I think.
Now, when you went to college, did you go to college expecting to get into law enforcement, or were you aiming for something else for schooling?
My goal in college was to play on a college lacrosse team and figure out what would I do with my degree once I got done. I had really high standards. So yeah, I had a history degree from a small school in Southern Maryland called St. Mary's College. I really enjoyed my college experience, but I honestly didn't have that plan. It wasn't until I got out and started really looking for jobs and trying to figure out what I wanted to do
Right.
that sort of steered me that way. And then the
Right.
military came as a result of those actually uh, refusals during those interviews. So sometimes you don't get what you want, but it sends you in the right direction, and we can get really ethereal about that. But I think that happened all for the right reasons.
Yeah, sure. Now it usually does. I have that conversation a lot with folks, just kind of like if you look back at your path and these different pivot points that got you to where you are today, it's just, I don't know, it's really a neat reflection to kind of see these times that kind of really altered, where we landed. Yeah, I mean, so where are you from originally? You landed in St. Mary's. Are you from Maryland
I'm
or nearby?
I am. I'm from Silver Spring, Maryland. I was an Army brat. I moved around a lot as a kid, and my dad worked out of Walter Reed Army Medical
Oh,
Center
right
down
on.
in D.C.
Okay.
When he was later in my life when he was assigned there. That was sort of my permanent home. That's where I went to high school.
Right on. Cool. Yeah, no, so I'm over here on the shore myself, born and raised in Maryland. So yeah, so did you Army brat, were you here a lot of your younger years in Maryland?
No, actually, lived in Texas. I lived overseas in Europe for 6 years, and then moved back. and then finally, my dad got assigned to
Right.
Maryland, and that's where he stayed.
Right. Right. Awesome. The with regard to joining the Marine Corps, so father's Army, was there why Marines, I guess, with that said?
Well, I actually did try and join the Army,
Uh,
and the recruiters kind of dragged their feet. And there's this old cadence that said, "Mama told Johnny." In this case, it was Mama told Ivan not to go downtown because, and all the Marines right now are rolling their eyes. They're like, "Oh, come on, Ivan, did you really bring that up?" But this is the truth. I mean, I walked down, and there was a Marine gunnery sergeant sitting there, and he said, "Hey, what are you doing in the Army office? Why don't you come talk to me?" And uh, slick salesman, I guess. And next thing I know,
oh
I was
yeah.
in an OSO office and on my way to Marine OCS in Quantico. I mean, it literally was kind of that fast. And really, it was just to jumpstart the career. Uh, had the Army been a little faster, I probably would have pretty gone that way. I really wanted to be a Green Beret. It ended up becoming a special operations officer inside of the Marine Corps, which didn't exist at the time that I joined. Of course, that
Mm,
wasn't necessarily the goal.
mm.
You know, so once I joined, I was at that point entrenched,
Yeah,
and then I
yeah.
became institutionalized,
Oh
and you know
yeah,
that
yeah.
feeling.
Yeah, I've been working with a guy this week, and he's '03, med boarded out, unfortunately. But man, just I love talking to Marines. Just the love of the Marine Corps. Like he just can't say it enough. You know, I miss the Marines. I love the Marines, and it's just you're right. I mean, we're just institutionalized. It becomes a part of us, and that's where the once Marine always Marine comes from. Man, we just embody the core, man.
Well,
The so
I also won't lie. I mean, the dress blues were an appeal once I got to see them, and I like to think I looked as good as those guys who were in the recruiting posters. I think we all do, but we also know the truth. But
yeah.
anyway, I mean, you can dress up anybody in those things, and you're coming along, so it's going to be okay.
Yeah, I think that goes without saying anymore, right? Like
Yep.
when people are asked, like, because how many times have you heard that, right? It was the uniform, man. I don't want to wear the greens. I wanted to wear them dress blues, and
That's right.
that's a tipping point for so many. So what was your job that you were targeting in the Marines? What was your original list, your job?
Well, I came in on a ground contract. So that's an open contract for people who don't really know. You get assigned based upon how you perform it and the needs of the Marine Corps, which is sort of a dreaded catch-all. Um, but I wanted to be an infantry officer, so I became an infantry officer, and that's where I
Okay.
started out. I started actually on the West Coast. If I was smart, I would have stayed out there, but instead I pursued the MARSOC piece once it came up, Marine Special Operations Command, and that was all on the East Coast. And I ended up doing a lot of my time at Camp Lejeune. But I really, that's where I got my basis for leadership and being with Marines was at BLT 14 out in Camp Horno. For those of you who are familiar with that, it means
Right
oven
on.
in Spanish. So and it lives up to its name. So
West Coast, were you at Pendleton, or where were you at out
mhm.
there? Yeah, right on. Yeah, I I didn't go a ton of places, but I was at Pendleton as well with the FSSG back then, and I tell people, man, it's like best duty station in Marine Corps. Like it's just
Totally.
so much at your hands, right? You can 30 minutes San Diego, 40 minutes LA, 5 minutes to the beach, another 40 minutes you're out in Palm Springs or whatever. Just like there's just so much there. Yeah. So many people, but my 2 bedroom apartment costs as much as the mortgage on my, 3,000 square foot house today. But
You're sure.
but great place to be.
They say you pay for the weather. So
100%, man.
yeah.
100%. But yeah, I mean, awesome area. And I mean, great place to get out and compared to growing up in Maryland, where we got to check the weather and then look at those lies because whatever it says it's going to be, it's not. And then you're moving to San Diego area, 75 and sunny every day. I didn't have to check the weather for 4 years, until I came back home. And funny story about that, I brought my car back home and like the air conditioner wasn't working. And so I take it to the mechanic and he's like, when's the last time you turned this air conditioner on? I said, 1998. He's like, what? And I told him, I've been out there in Oceanside or whatever. And he goes, dude, if you don't use it, you lose it because I guess the seals crack or whatever the case. So I had to get rid of my car. But yeah, man. So what was it? What you thought it was going to be? So you had this vision. You wanted to be an infantry officer. What did you think it was going to be, and what did it end up being as far as your job, your career? I mean, obviously you stayed longer than you thought you were, but what'd you get out of the Marine Corps?
I think that's a pretty layered question,
Yeah, man, take
and
your time.
no, and I love it. I just, I my brain started to sort of rack through. I think in the beginning, yes, there was a sense of adventure. I, I because I only thought I was going to be in for 4 years. I kind of wanted to pack as much as I could into those 4 years.
Yeah.
So becoming an infantry officer was the way to get into force recon or get into reconnaissance, and so for me, that just seemed like this logical step to just go into all these adventurous units as I could. I also had this vision of leading small, being a small unit leader, which I really really enjoyed,
Mm.
and I liked that a lot. Not only in the infantry, but certainly when I got in reconnaissance, because you're dealing yet with even smaller teams, and they have a greater responsibility with the things that they do there. Even though the infantry skills are absolutely paramount, and I think there's incredible demonstration of that even in the current time right now with the Ukrainian crisis, with just small unit infantry leaders in conventional fighting, that is just really turning the tide of things, or stemming the tide of things there. We can get to that in a minute, but those baselines were established there, and I really enjoyed just that initial part of it. Then as it matured, or as my career matured, and some would nominally say I matured with it, as I got into smaller unit leadership and got into more, I would call it directed type of service through special operations, I really found that I like the autonomy. I did like, and you certainly have a framework. There's a thing that you have. It's not a free for all, but I got a lot more freedom of action, freedom of movement to make decisions and
Mm.
lead at different levels. And then you certainly work with different services where you then get a different perspective and flavor. And I know some very very competent, good officers and staff NCOs, just service members from across all services. So if it sounds like we're having a Marine get together between you and I right now, absolutely, sure, we get together and we want to talk about those things. But I would be remiss in not saying that there are several people within those organizations who were mentors, friends, I still stay in contact with, were very good, solid, professional people. And I just found that I really enjoyed that. And then, of course, you get moving and you get into a career. At the 10-year mark, you have to figure out what you're going to do within the Marine Corps. That's a huge crossroads for most people in the Marine Corps, regardless of rank. Because if you stay, you're pretty. You got your 4-year mark where you're either going to get in and keep going or keep going. You hit the 10-year mark, now you may as well stick it out. And it's a little bit of a short change to say, well, I'm going to get out. I'm only staying in because I only have 3 years left. Well, if it's really that burdensome, you probably should start thinking pretty quickly about what you're going to do. But if you really enjoy what you do to your last day, it becomes your calling, right? You are a profession. You're a professional soldier. You're a professional Marine. You're a professional um, in what you do, and you start studying your craft. You start studying what's like being a writer, an actor,
Yeah.
being a good mechanic who could look at a car and be like, dude, if you don't run your air conditioner, you got problems. Like there have to be translatable pieces there. And within the military, at least where I worked, and it was a kind of a niche organization, I admit, or at least a niche part of it, kind of a small part of it in a lot of ways. I was very fortunate to be a part of that, and I found that I could design my career the way I wanted to, even though there was significant risk in doing so.
Mm.
And so I like that, and it just led to other assignments and things that kept things interesting, and it also allowed me to be kind of a mentor teacher and give back quite a bit to not only developing other units, but maybe to foreign militaries and things overseas where you might not get those opportunities otherwise. It's a
Right.
long-winded discussion, but that kind of encapsulates the journey. And I think you
Yeah.
you change as you go along in those pieces, or as those pieces come along, and you change in your perspective. And then by the time I got done, it was not sort of a kicking and screaming, get out of the Marine Corps, leave the service. I just felt like it was time. I'd done what I think I wanted to do, and there was really more I wanted to explore.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I mean, it is. I mean, well, look, it's almost 25 years of your life, like you said, and in really impactful times, right? I mean, just what's some of like the major challenges you had to overcome over the last 25 years?
Can we refine that just a little bit? Just
Yeah, like what's some big, what's a major challenge you had to overcome?
Well, on a personal level, you had to get selected to go to these units. So those you
Mm,
had to really spend a lot of time not only being physically strong, but mentally switched on. I mean, you
hmm
had to get yourself to get into these units. You had to be able to be accepted, to be selected. That is a definition of elite.
mm,
And I'm not in this point saying I'm elite and better than anyone else. What I'm saying is to get to those age levels, you have to make a personal commitment. So those were big challenges to get there. Then once you were there, the other challenge was being meeting those requirements. Um, it was a departure point, and it took me a long time to learn that.
mm,
Like you had arrived and you say, okay, this is who I am, and they don't understand my brilliance. Well, no, and kind of nobody cares. You need to demonstrate that. You have
mm.
to kind of reset how you lead and adjust to situations, and that was certainly a challenge. And then certainly you're working in a hierarchy. You have to understand the environment to which you are in. And then I would say that, of course, being a leader in combat is one of the most challenging things that I've ever done. Not only for the people that I was leading, but their families back home. You
Sure.
make a contract and you make a commitment that you're going to do the best that you can to bring their loved ones back, and you also owe them the people in your charge the most dedicated leadership that you can give them.
Yeah.
And so you really are grinding internally to maintain that.
Right.
And so not putting on a false face, but you have to be consistent. You have to be the same person that they're dealing with, and not that is a hard uh, operational tempo. That's a hard rhythm to keep going. I
Yeah.
mean, if you're a drum, people, I love music, and the drummer Neil Peart, even that guy needed a break. Right, he played a 2.5 hour show, and he'd be like, "Look, I gotta give the arms a rest," despite
Sure.
his
Yeah.
expertise. And
Yeah.
he also went and got coaching from some very uh, Buddy Rich and some of these other, very masterful drummers to become a better drummer. There's always somebody better than you out there. There's always somebody that you admire.
Yeah.
And I think in these things, one of my challenges was to take a step back and say, man, I really need some coaching on this. I need
Yeah.
to figure out where I am and finding those mentors.
Yeah.
Again,
It,
layered questions, and I'm just kind of peeling back
no, no,
the
yeah, no.
cake, if you will.
Yeah, no, I love it. It's awesome. Yeah, and I love where you hit on that because I would agree, right? Like that being a leader, and it's kind of like what I'm doing today with Lions Guide and why I'm having these conversations because I personally believe that, like you're saying, being a leader is a high performing role. Like it's a high demand role, and you've really got to be on top of your game and growing to maintain and keep up with the demands of being a leader. I don't care what it is. Like if you're in charge of a nonprofit, small team, big organization, being a leader is hard work. It's not just a single part of an assembly line that you're doing. Your job is a piece. When you're in charge, there's a lot of dynamics to it. There's so much real intelligence, emotional intelligence, leading up and down the chain. Like there's just so much there. um and it's the best job you'll ever love if you're willing to think and operate at that level, to what it takes. It's so easy to be a bad leader, be a toxic leader, right?
All right.
Flip, who's helping me with some Lions Guide stuff. He loves the leadership topic and focuses there. And he had a great segment just said like, there's good leadership, bad leadership, and toxic leadership. And toxic, you can see it from a mile away, right? That the leader's just, he's doing all the wrong things. It's obvious, and and then the bad leaders they're good guys, but they're not good leaders, right? They're just not doing the things, but they're well intended. They're just not doing good leader things, and I think that's an issue today that I think we're starving for good leadership, and as a result of a lack of leadership, we're letting bad and toxic leadership just fill the void. You know what I mean? At sometimes like the bad leadership out of necessity, certainly want to exit toxic leadership, but it's just a hard job, and when you're in a leadership role, you just got to really be a high performer, to it's all of the above. It takes everything you got, so
Right, and to your point of leadership crisis, I believe there is a leadership crisis in this country. I think it might be more endemic than that. We're in the epidemic's a big word, but it might be. There's a leadership crisis, I think, everywhere. And you mentioned different types of leaders filling the void. It's any sort of leadership filling the void,
Yeah.
in an attempt to find the right thing. And I think one of the other, I think maybe there's a fourth leader, or maybe he's a combination in there. They are a combination of pieces, but it's the disengaged leader
Yeah.
is the one who's, and we created a culture in the military in a lot of ways because of the wars we've been involved in, particularly at higher levels, that you had leaders who they didn't have to do anything right so long as they didn't do anything wrong.
Right.
And so then they didn't take any risks and they didn't do anything. And then that just went down to their subordinates at each level going like, well, what are we doing? Like who's running this? And that is what is, you have to be engaged. You have to get out there with your people. You got to take questions. You've got to be able to be available. Um, People are programmed the way they're programmed. You can't make somebody be somebody they're not. If they're not a particularly good people person, they're not going to be that type of engaging person, but they still have qualities. They still have things they can offer. And there's a leadership piece that just needs to be turned there. And I was talking with a person who was asking about getting some leadership coaching. And she said, well, I've already had leadership coaching, so I don't really need that. And I said, okay, well, what is it that you need? And that's where that couldn't be defined, because I think people are looking for those immediate solutions without doing some serious analysis about what's wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And then you almost have to take a step back and deconstruct what's there. And I have something that I've kind of come up with, and it's true. You have to have patience for the process, because you'll get there, but sometimes it's just a little bit slower, a little bit more systematic in its analysis. I spent a lot of time jumping out of airplanes. I never took one of those trips up in the air for granted. And I always did the same checks every single time. And I would say to myself, you're about to jump out of an airplane. Like, there's nothing routine about this. Like you've done this many times, but there's nothing here that you can
Right.
absolutely assume away.
Right.
And so those pieces are all things that go into not only individual alignment, but then leading to, as I said, about organizational culture and the people from the top who lead those types of things.
Right.
Yeah.
With a lot of the work you're doing in surrounding leadership, with Golden Compass, what's the problem you're trying to solve with your clients? How do you see it?
We're trying to help them solve their problems.
Mm.
We can provide perspective. The president of the company's name is Jay Lee, and I'm the CEO. And between we spend a lot of time looking. I don't like the word client, and it's not you saying it. It's just I wish there was better. I look at it as a partnership. A way to form a team. We look at the people that we're working to work with, to actually help them develop their teams to what their vision and of what their requirement is, instead of us going, well, this is what you should do.
Yeah.
We can offer perspective based upon where we've been and things that we have looked at, but that's not really the right lens. The company, the people within those companies know something is missing. They know something's wrong. But back to the initial example I used, if they can't have that conversation, if that's an uncomfortable space, we want to bring them into that space and have that with them. And really look at something and say, okay, well, maybe this is it. Does that ring true? Help them develop those pieces. And that requires a relationship.
Yeah.
You can do one-time consultation. You can have a keynote and get perhaps something out of what we offer, which I'm more than happy to provide. But we'd prefer to have a long-term, long-standing go-to conversation that they feel is valuable in such a way that they want to continue that.
Yeah.
And that's something we want to foster. It's fostering and developing that to then be there for them at the time they're making the choices, hopefully based upon all of their own analysis and our coaching.
Right.
That's the most effective.
I love it. And I love the way you even corrected that, because it's not transactional, right? It's and it is perspective. It's an advisory role, much like, in a way, and of sorts, like, like a third party finance agency or your IT service provider or whatever. These are trusted advisors that you as a organization go, hey, trusted advisor, look at my organization through your lens and help me, right? Like, this is the mission we're trying to accomplish. here's the issues we're dealing with. Take a look. And yours is the leadership lens, hey, this is how we're seeing it. And I also honor what you're saying, because I would agree that, people are looking for the formula. Like, since I've been what I've been doing, for an example, like initially people will go, hey, come show me what you did. Like, hold on. Like, what I did is what I did for me and my time and my situation with my clients and so on. So I can't just give you like the playbook that here's the 5 things I did to have success and in growing my business and exiting and whatever. But I'm happy to talk about your goals and you and what you're going through, because I'm happy to yield my experience and perspective for you to learn from. But I'm not here to tell you what to do. And I love like your approach to that with your clients, because because that's it. You can't tell them what to do. You can only help guide them to their own answers that's a fit for them and their dynamics. And because it is that, and that's why leadership is so hard. There's not a one way cookie cutter type of solution for any of it. And nor the day. You can build all the systems in the world, but you're going to have to manage the exceptions and the comings of it. So I think it's awesome. Now, why is the leadership aspect so important to you? Like, what made you want to do this with regard to leadership and helping organizations?
Well, I'm a big fan of Simon Sinek,
Mm.
and as far as some of the leadership tenets he has, and one of them is start with why.
Yep.
And I went through a long analysis piece with another coach to help me find my why statement, and we spent a lot of time breaking that down. So why I do this is to lead with purpose so that other people maximize their potential.
Hmm.
And I think I've got a pretty good perspective, I have a depth of perspective. I have a focused perspective based upon my experience and based upon empathy to be able to work with different people. To your point of IT or shipping or business development, I'm not a business development guy. I'm not an IT specialist. I am not a supply chain person. What I do focus on is leadership within organizations to make all of those systems work better.
Yeah.
And that's why I do that, because if you've got good leadership, then everything starts to improve. And it's really easy to point a finger. It's really easy to throw a tantrum. I've had people that I was working with, excuse me, walk out of the room because they were fed up, not with me, but with the situation. And then they were so rude they couldn't continue talking about it. Then afterwards, they acted like nothing had happened. So that you talk about toxic, there's some psychopathy there. There's some all kinds of things
Sure.
going
Yeah.
on. If they want to be helped, they're going to have to break that down for themselves as to why they are that way. They want to have that discussion, we can do so. It makes it really hard to build a relationship. But
Yeah.
someone gets frustrated, they sit there and say, I'm not sure I'm understanding what you're saying, or I don't understand this. And we have a little bit more of a in-depth conversation. We can probably peel away. Let's not keep things personal. Let's peel away just where things are. And then the Jay and I call them pain points,
Yeah.
the things that are difficult, and try and get around those. But as I said, I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a social construct developer, but I definitely have some perspective in working with a lot of different cultures and people around the world. And
Yeah.
like I used to advise people in the Afghan army. I also worked with a couple other militaries overseas, and at no point did I couldn't say, hey, you're doing this wrong. You had to find ways to have some very difficult conversations. And quite frankly, in the U.S. military with senior members, you had to have difficult conversations, particularly if you felt like they weren't maybe hitting the mark.
Sure.
That's a careful conversation to have. I've had plenty of people poke at me and say that this conversation's over, we're moving on. Got to accept it. Sometimes that leader was right, but other times, I think that's really what's lacking is a great deal of communication and
Sure.
having those pieces deconstructed. I keep using that word, but it's true. If you really look at it like a centrifuge, that you're just separating everything to get all the little pieces that are actually conform or comprise the whole. Well, then you can really look at systems and what breaks down and where. I've got friends who are in the entertainment industry. I think that not really being, and I'm not a member of the entertainment industry. I like to write screenplays and I like to talk to directors and producers, but many people that I talk to talk about these systemic problems they have on film sets. And if I look at a film crew being assembled for a very short period of time, and some would say 10 years is not a short period of time if you're filming Lord of the Rings, but you've got these crews that are coming together. They're from all over different disciplines within the entertainment industry to form a team. If they don't have good leadership and there's not a good team building feeling about that, that's going to be a very inefficient way to make a film.
Yeah,
And I haven't been on every film set and I haven't been everywhere, but this is a trend that I've seen from having conversations with these people
sure.
across a wide level. Some of these are very, very big name producers, very high levels of success, and others are indie filmmakers who just really get it. And I love having those conversations. I love understanding it, particularly when I go to watch a movie and go, how did this thing get made?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, absolutely. And that's a big thing that I think just leadership is fundamentally the make or breaker of any accomplishment. Like, just the success of a mission, whether it's a business or putting a film together or whatever. I mean, the leadership is probably one of the most important things. So, and because, the good leadership's going to solve a lot of problems, right? You go, well, what about market conditions? And what about the people you're hiring? And what about whatever? And I'm like, yeah, that's what a leader does, right? They adjust to the market. They make sure the team's right. Like you can't, without the leadership, you can't succumb those things. Even if you're in a great market, but you've got a bad leader, you will fail in the great market. So to me, I just always come back. It's just that leadership is, if something's going wrong, you got to start looking at the leadership, because what are they doing or what are they not doing? Right. Maybe they're just refusing to pivot from the failures or the market conditions or whatever, and again, just comes right back to leadership.
And a fabulous example of that, almost the Lazarus effect, is a guy like Steve Jobs. And I talk about him respectfully here. I know that he's passed away, but this is a guy who founded a company, was fired by his own company, and then rehired by his company to come back and keep leading it. And so that guy just had a piece that the company found that it had to have, and there was probably a great deal of negotiations as to how those things would work when they brought him back on. But a visionary, you're holding with your iPhone and these iPads we're using. We have more technology than was in the lunar landing unit.
Mm.
That was all analog, if you can imagine. So
Yeah.
I mean that shows true vision, true leadership in a market that almost didn't exist before they invented it. Apple and Bill Gates, et cetera. And this is only within the last 35 to 40 years. So I mean that's just impressive to be able to be world changing like that. And that's a corporate model or example. But yeah, I think there's just tons of lessons that can be learned across all kinds of pieces. It need not be military, even if that's my primary my area of expertise, or at least the
Sure.
experience that I bring. But that isn't meant to be paint me narrowly, or that it's such a broad brush that this works everywhere. Like that's why we want to have that conversation with
Yeah.
our clients and our people and build a partnership.
And I don't, I'm thankful that it's becoming more a part of the organizational conversation, rather than all the operational and tactical stuff, like just the management piece and the HR piece and, the P&L, right? Like I, I feel, the leadership and culture aspect is bubbling up to be more a part of the conversation, more a part of the training, more a part of the focus. So I am thankful for that. I feel like in organizations, and hats off to, folks like, Jocko and these guys who made, leadership a big part of the conversation. And I don't know, brought it mainstream a little bit, but we needed it. I mean, and I think there needs to be more soldiers in the good fight saying we need better leadership, and you can be a better leader if, to your point about your client walking out of the room, you got to open yourself up to it. You got to, check the ego and look to grow. Like, I mean, you knew this from the Marine Corps, right? Our leadership principles, know yourself and seek self-improvement. Like, yeah, because it's always, you got to constantly find that growth as a leader.
And going back to what you were saying about templates, and that's a risky thing. There's good to have departure points, like standard operating procedures. things that give you a baseline for working and working well. And the Marine Corps has that in our orders process. And as you said, the leadership traits. Um, if those are tried to applied over any and all situations, they're not going to fit. And there's
Sure.
a lot of there's a lot of people, a lot of leaders who are looking for that solution. Um, the one thing I'd like to highlight also is that COVID not only changed the world on so many levels because of its the swift how swiftly it spread, how little we knew about it, how still kind of little we do know about it, and its impact on society. But really, in the workplace, it upended the way that businesses work, and they've turned to a largely remote, largely distant, kind of
Mhm.
disconnected environment. The office is sort of coming back, but it's maybe a hybrid type of work style. And there are some companies that just aren't going to go back to that at all. And in where Jay and I work, we called that distributed operations. And you had a central headquarters that then had sort of a spoke out to, that was the hub. And then you had spokes out to different operating areas. You have to have a high levels of trust. You have to have high levels of confidence. You have to have subordinates. When you say trust your subordinates, uh, the leadership has to not only trust them, but the subordinates have to trust the leadership that the decisions they are making
Mhm.
are correct and aligned. There are a lot of companies out there, my opinion, who have not yet figured out how to do that well. They're
Yeah.
working their way through it, but that's another thing that Jay and I really can bring to the table. That's one of the things we really are able to look at. I mean, I managed 600 people in an area the size of West Virginia with a massive operating budget. Never mind their care and feeding, logistics, all in combat zones for
Mm.
months on end.
Mm.
Um, so that is very challenging. That does not mean that I know how to make money in a Fortune 500 company. So that's not what I'm being brought on to do. What I can do
Sure.
though is help someone who's working in distributed operations try and figure out, how do you reach your people? How do you keep that morale up? How do you keep people from burning out? How do you keep things interesting? And not only that, how do you connect? And it is more. That's where we're talking about this leadership crisis. Is that we have turned the world has just turned in such a way, pivoted in such a way that they're dealing with new environments, but it's almost like they're on a foggy day. You can only see but so far, and you
Yeah.
really have to trust your wayfinder, i.e., a compass or the direction you think you're going, or you can get really turned around. And some companies are really foundering with that, I think. Um, so I just wanted to put that out there because people just say, well, I now work remotely. I can do whatever I want. And there's the great resignation. Maybe it's the great migration, the great cross leveling, because people are trying to find out exactly what they want. They've got new opportunities like they never had before. Heck, I got out of the military. I had plenty of opportunities to look at different corporate uh, assignments. I had contracting assignments. I had things readily available to me, and I had new space I wanted to explore. I can't be happier to sit here and talk with you and be part of an emerging company that's just really out there to try and help people negotiate some of this, to
Yeah.
navigate some of this, because that's all tied back to that leadership challenge, and then that ties to your organizational culture. What kind of culture do you have across a distributed environment? We really want to help people analyze that.
Yeah. And that's it. It's picking your head up, because I like the fog analogy as well, right? Like you got to pick your head up. You got to, again, back to the gambit of leadership objectives, like the trust, the communication, establishing the clear vision. Like that's, again, it's not one thing, it's everything. All those things matter and are what the leadership need to tend to, and cultivate in the environment. But yeah, I really like your point about, the the employees or subordinates, however you want to look at it, trusting their leadership, right? And having faith that, because, again, bad leadership, mistrust, and you're taking directives, you're being asked to work harder or more or differently or whatever, but you're suspect of the directives, right? It's, you're almost falling before you're, getting started, so I love it. What is so talk to me a little bit about leading with purpose. What is that all about? What does that mean?
You, my my purpose, as I said, was to help people maximize their potential, but it's the purpose that is being applied against how people lead, and it's sort of people now are listening to this going, well, that sounds really cyclical, but I think it's the truth. Like why are you doing what you're doing?
Mm.
If you've got a purpose, you've got a vision of where you want to go, people need to understand that why you lead, why someone leads and pushes forward and wants to be a part of that They've got to understand that ahead of time. Some people are egotistical. Some people just like to be in charge. I've worked with plenty of commanders in the Marine Corps, and one flat out told me, "I don't care what it is. I like to be in charge because that's how I feel like I'm leading." A little bit difference between leading and just being in a leadership position, but
Yeah.
he did just fine. I'm not going to bring don't need to talk too much about him, but the bottom line was that was his approach. That's what he wanted. At least he was clear about it. That was his purpose. Other people very much are caring servant leaders and want to be there for their people. That can lead to being taken advantage of at times. I've had that happen to myself. But I think helping people understand their purpose, helping people understand why they're out there, and is much more. There leads to some enlightenment on the side of the leader.
Yep.
Just more than, well, I've got to get this done because the market shares need to be higher or we need to have better throughput. That's why we're doing this. Well, that's why you're doing this specific thing, but why do you do? And it's not the same as what you do.
Yeah.
What and why are distinct. That
Yeah.
purpose piece, I think, is what defines that.
In some ways also like energizes the team, right? When they know what it's for, like this work, this effort, like what is the impact? What are we solving for? And, that gives the team life, instead of like, we're making 50 widgets today. That's your job. And I know it's going to take 60 hours this week, but that's your job, right? Like that's not a good what for, but those widgets are going to go help, this mission or this bigger cause or whatever. And now it just brings some energy to the effort, so to speak. And people feel like they're a part of something, and so on. I love to mention of ego, and how do we solve for it? Like, so how does an organization or a leader, like, what are some ways that we solve for this ego problem that sometimes rears its ugly head?
My opinion is everyone needs to admit they have one. You have to admit that you got an ego, that you are involved, you are wrapped up in this stuff. Being egotistical, someone probably has to tell you that, and it's ugly.
Yeah.
I'm not in the business of telling someone that they're egotistical. If they ask, perhaps we could have a conversation. But people have to understand they do have an ego, and that they are invested in these things. And some people just don't take any time to analyze how that bleeds over, not only into their leadership but also to their teams. And sometimes that can happen in negative ways. I have felt that myself. It is, who doesn't want to be told you've done a great job? Who doesn't want to have commendation, maybe even adulation by people? I mean, there are plenty of rock stars and people out there who feel like they've earned the right to be who they are, and by being successful. The more humble people, though, get a lot more done and build really strong teams and pull things along, through their actions. But if that isn't acknowledged, if someone's not willing to really take an introspective examination, that's a hard thing to correct. That's an opinion, and sometimes I probably default to that in my own method, which may not always be healthy, because then you start second guessing a lot of things, and kind of can be a negative. Too much of one thing can be a negative. But the last thing you want to do to somebody who's egotistical is tell them they're acting out.
Or that harm it. Yeah. Like,
yeah, you gotta ease along a little bit of that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that again is from a leadership perspective, because even, working with your clients, you're playing a leadership role, right? You're leading them to better leadership. Let's say you're influencing it, you're guiding them. And again, that calls on all your leadership skills as well to navigate maybe someone who is high in ego, and it's not them, it's everyone else's fault, and no one ever listens to all my great ideas, and you're dealing with that personality, and you've got to
they will
really
they will swing it back around on the person. They'll be like, well, here's all the things that you didn't contribute, or I do so much for this company and nobody even sees it. That right there, like, if you're really a servant leader and you do a lot for the company that nobody sees, that's why you're there. That's the purpose, right? Like, you should be putting those kinds of efforts and hours in there. There's a lot of stuff that's going to go unrecognized. You're going to do a lot of hard work, but if you feel like your employees are ungrateful for the things they don't see you do, you're wrapped up in that in such a way that you can't you're not going to get that perspective. And
Sure.
I've had leaders say that. I also spent a lot of time on a presentation one time, and I was giving it to an Army officer who literally just looked at me and said, "Get to your point." Like he didn't have time for it anymore. Okay, we're getting to our point. Like, we're not, but sir, look how awesome this is. Like, that doesn't matter. Like, you're going to have to go to the right thing. And so you have to understand that's kind of within a framework that you're going to have to work within. But those are very tough leaders. Those are very tough leadership pieces that a subordinate or somebody else would have to deal with. I
Yeah.
fully admit.
Yeah, and you're right, and it does come back to the important point you made earlier is that they have to be ready for change. Like they have to be saying, "Hey," they have to reach a point. I would say, like this egotistical leader that we're trying to solve for. I feel like they've got to come to the point where they recognize like something's not working, and I'm ready to figure out what that is. Right? How to, right? Like maybe they have to see like. And I guess that's the only way you can try to help solve for it is help them look at it from a different perspective. Like, well, how do you think how do you want to see it turn out? Right. They're not giving you your props, so to speak. And how do you want to see it? What do you want to see? And just kind of help them kind of, you know, understand and hopefully they can get to a point or reach a point there go, it's not working the way I thought it was. Like maybe I am doing something wrong. What could I be doing differently or whatever? And because if they're just dug in that it's everybody else, it's not them. Like that's a really hard thing to solve for, and it causes a lot of distrust. When you have like someone in an organization that it's all about them and it's very clear it's all about them. It's been my experience that those around that person treat everything that comes from them with suspect, right? The trust isn't there because you don't know if the direction or information they're given is only to serve their means. Like they're not thinking for the team. They're thinking for themselves. So when they are in meetings or whatever, they're I feel like sometimes those individuals you kind of treat with suspect and you kind of got to really try to dig in and find out like what's their agenda, right? Is it self-serving or is it team serving? Is it mission serving? Because I've just come across some of these personalities that it's just self-serving in everything they do, and so you treat them with suspect because you don't know. Like you got to really, I don't know. It's just
Well, a fabulous example of that is Vladimir Putin. You just summed it up right there.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, just the way he approaches stuff and how he is managing, quote unquote, managing, at least working on this crisis that he has created. It's kind of fascinating in a lot of ways. Of course, this is on a horrific scale of human
Sure, yeah.
cost. So I'm not by any means diminishing anything like that. I'm just, you really honed in on that. And one thing I wanted to say, kind of speak on a more positive side, that the other side of the negative leadership piece is companies that are really thriving and working well. And the kind of leader I'd like to work with, although I like leadership challenges and working through all kinds of problem solving, but I like working with leaders who are not only successful, maybe we help them develop into a good organizational culture and team. Things start to fire and work well within their organization. And then the next question is, how do we maintain this? What's the next step? What is our next objective and how are we going to achieve that? Like much more visionary planning, not just the objective that you're trying to achieve, but what do you want to see as a result? And then from there, what are your long-term goals? Helping to define that's going to give your company vision. That's going to give your leader purpose. That's going to give purpose to your people. Like we need to keep going with back to your widget thing. We're going to make 60 widgets today. Now we're going to make 90. Here's why. We make 90 widgets. It's good for the bottom line. It helps you with your bonuses, on and on and on. But also we're contributing to the bigger whole. And these are where our widgets go. Like people have a much stronger sense of pride in that. And I love to be, help organizations achieve it. So I know I had brought up two very vastly different things within the same leadership comment, but you brought one piece up, and then I wanted to hone on that other one.
I think it's awesome. What are some other things you're helping organizations solve for? Like whether it's common mistakes or corrections you're working with? Like what are the type of things that you're solving for with organizations?
One of the big pieces that Jay and I are working on is individual assessments. Mm-hmm. So that each person in the company not only understands themselves, But then within that company or within those teams, those people kind of understand each other. Like it's not, yeah, there's a little psychology there. We have a very set piece of how we do those analysis through the John Maxwell. It's called the DISC system. It's an analysis system.
Mm.
If people are honest and forthright in the way they fill that out and the way that they then the results that come out, the feedback that Jay and I can provide are not only for the individual, but then when those individuals get into team building, and this is not saying it's as we talk about with templates, that it's going to solve all the issues, but when you really, if you and I had worked together for a while and there'd be those things, well, why is Dale like this? Or how come Dale approaches this way? And you'd be like, well, he's going to react this way. If you knew that, because we kind of have a systematic understanding and a common ground from which we analyze our teamwork, then from there you can really build effective teams. And then you can, again, it goes to culture. It becomes this cascading piece, but upward, right? Like it just keeps building as you build it out, and then your team becomes very cohesive. So we like to break things down at the individual level, and this really depends on the leader, how in depth they want to be. For a company of 600 people, it could be done. It'd be very time consuming, but useful for the right groups of people. But if you've got your managers and you're kind of working on a more focused group, then you can kind of build that out from there. But this goes back to what we're talking about with the distributed operations, your cycle of trust, faith between subordinates, junior leaders and senior leaders, going both ways, communication. It is a more holistic approach. So that was one of the things we're really, really honing in on.
Yeah, no, I love that. So what's another kind of switching gears on you a little bit. So I saw you've gotten into writing. You publish on some big platforms, Task and Purpose, Newsweek. Like how has writing come to be a big part of your life like that?
I started out writing. I've been writing most of my life in some capacity. I was a history major, always had to write papers, but I really enjoyed creative writing and getting into just that space. It helped to be an outlet. It became even more important when I was deployed. It was a thing that I was able to not only keep with journals, but also start recording a record of where I was, my head, individual perspectives on a day, whether you were in a firefight. I have lost people in combat. I've had people wounded. How those feelings, how you deal with that. So those became areas for me to reflect upon and look at and go back to. And then from there, I decided that as I was getting out, that maybe writing was something I wanted to actually pursue. And I know people who have actually done that, and they're becoming quite successful. One of them is a good friend of mine named Worth Parker. He's published and he's doing very, very well as an author. But he's a coach and a mentor for me. We began discussing some of my writing, and he said, "I think there's something there. It's up to you to get it done." And he also illustrated to me, along with a good friend of mine named Scott Husing, that writing is not only if you want to be a writer, it has to become a job. It's not a pastime. It's not a hobby, which I reluctantly accepted because I was enjoying the hobby side of it. And now I know exactly what they're talking about, because it is hard. It's hard work. And it became something I really enjoyed. And then I was put in touch with a few other people like Paul Zolder from Task and Purpose and a couple other outlets, and things are starting to move forward. I look at it kind of as a emerging artist who got some playing time maybe on Spotify, and now people are like, okay, well, you got one song, but that's not an album, so what do you got? So you have to start following up with that. That's self-imposed. Trying not to get back to ego, trying to be too egotistical about all of this. I have to be able to continue a rhythm with that. And I've been talking to other writers and other people. I'm also working pretty heavily on a novel, which I'd really like to get assembled and moving this summer. It doesn't mean it's going to be published this summer, but I'm moving forward on that. I've got a couple of short stories that are moving towards publication, so people can get a little more feeling for me. And then I do enjoy these podcasts. I enjoy these conversations with all kinds of people. I'm trying to get not only the Golden Compass name out there, but certainly a flavor for who we are, an understanding for who I am. And the last part of that, it's also been kind of cathartic. Somebody told me that, and he transitioned from the military a little while ago, that transition is actually an ongoing We used to say selection is continuous. Well, I would say the transition is continuous. I'm only 2 months into this. Yes, I started a little bit ahead of time, like by off ramping from the military, but I am still learning this environment. I'm still learning how to navigate Compass, learn how to be a part of this, and it, I went through a lot in 24 years. Maybe it took me a long. It's going to take me longer to categorize that, really come to terms with it, and all of this is part of a larger assembly. I wouldn't say cleansing because I don't really want to get rid of it. I want to figure out what to do with it,
Mm.
going back to my purpose. And so
Yeah.
writing really helps kind of put that in perspective.
I love it. So how do you get it all done? Like, what do you think, like habits wise, because you're running a company, you're consulting organizations, you're writing books, doing all the other podcasts and articles. Like, what do you think, like what habits contribute most to your success in all these areas?
I make lists. And I also try and map out my day.
Mm.
Day planners are great. I use notebooks. Of course, it depends on the notebook I have at hand because there's not like one that's like, okay, this is all the things I'm going to write. I just whatever I'm writing down, I have to remember where I put it. So,
Yeah.
in my own organizational uh, admission here, I probably could be better at it, but I make sure that I write stuff down. I go back and reflect on those lists. Did I accomplish things? If I need to follow up with somebody, and I try pretty hard not to overschedule. Um, the whole calendar, get on my calendar thing was new to me, and so I I sort of was like, okay, well, I have to set aside my time to be on your time. I guess that makes sense. And then when you would call them, or this happened to me, you call somebody, you're like, well, kind of forgot about that, or oh, I don't have time today. Well, wait a second, I committed my
You had
time.
someone sent you their Calendly link and didn't have time for you. Holy
Right, or they
crap,
blow
man!
off the. I was just like, I don't. That's bad leadership right there.
Yeah.
Just send me
Oh.
an email. Say something like, "Hey, I can't make it today," or whatever. But so these things that was interesting. So I try and be very cognizant of the time. I try and make sure that I've got things lined out
Yeah.
and not overschedule, and also build out enough time to get things accomplished. And I do set aside time for writing. Uh, I have multiple projects going at once because if something's not working in one project, I don't like the term writer's block, but sometimes you just sit down and something's not happening. So you can switch gears and go to another project.
Mm,
It also keeps the brain moving, which
mm.
helps. And honestly, it allows for some reflective moments, going back to clients and going back to maybe issues they're working with that I'm thinking through as I'm writing about something. I'll say, that's where this thing comes down. So you can put down one thing and move to the other. It requires a little bit of maybe Tetris, Jenga. You're trying to keep it from falling, but you're fitting the pieces together. And yeah,
Yeah.
so
No, it's awesome. Yeah, the Calendly thing, man. I only laugh and jest because like it can be efficient. Like I use it for a lot of things, but as a means of efficiency in that like because we're time blocking, right? We're saying, hey, my I'm gonna spend time here, there, whatever. And when you're trying to coordinate with someone, like it takes all this back and forth, and here's the days I'm available, here's the days I'm available. So I like kind of have windows like, hey, would love to sync up or would love to do this. And my Calendly is corralled off into areas. So if someone's booking time, like they're going to go in a time that I have already set aside for those activities, right? So but yeah, man, it's stuff like that drives me bananas. So I had to pick on
yeah.
him a little bit. It's but again,
it,
it's so
all this is
easy
in
to
an
be so
adjustment.
bad, right? It's so easy to
Yeah.
be a bad leader, man. Oh my goodness. So what do you do to like keep the energy up? How do you recharge?
I do like to continue PT, physical training. I like to run and go to the gym. Sometimes stepping away from projects to do something else. I'm a woodworker, so I'll go
Right on.
work in the wood shop a little bit. Anything to kind of keep the creative mind moving, but away from the thing that you're currently working on. That will help a great deal. Um, they call it self care, right? But you got to realize where you are and stuff. Some days I just don't want to write. You get exhausted and you're sort of like, well, man, if you're on a deadline, you don't have a choice. You got to keep grinding that out. But that goes back to making sure you've got time blocks, got things going so that you've got an opportunity. And if you have to write into your day, hey, I'm going to go drink a beer at 4:30 in the afternoon as my reward. Well, that's part of your schedule. Like it's
Yeah.
okay. Like go do that. Oh, I didn't get a chance to do that. Well, did you not get a chance, or you didn't make the time, or you didn't factor that in for yourself? Like if I miss a day going out to PT, it's because I didn't go to do that. It's not because, oh, I ran out of time.
Sure.
I try and get up. The one thing the military did curse me with is I still get up early. I still get my day moving, and I try and build in as much as I can get done during the day,
Yeah.
recognizing that I do run my own schedule, and that's one thing the military would do wonderfully for you, as you know, is you didn't have to worry about where you needed to be at any part of the day.
Yeah.
Uh, so you do run your own schedule, and you can factor those things in. But I think there's a bit of self-care, but also self-leadership. You have to accept where your limitations are. You have to accept how you're feeling on those days, and maybe taking a step back will actually help you get moving.
100.
Um,
100%.
and those are hard things to recognize, particularly because if you catch a nose down and you're just after it, maybe that momentum's great, but there's a reason as a writer your first draft sucks, and it does.
Awesome. So, anything else you're exciting that you're working on right now?
This one screenplay I've got going on, I'm pretty excited about it. I've got to get some more refinement. It's actually due to a friend of mine for review, which means it'll just be yet another version draft, but kind of neat to watch how those things unfold. Very excited about the future. Like I'm really just enjoying the space that I'm in, and
Yeah.
where how we're talking about things. And I'm looking forward to opportunities. It's really amazing.
Awesome. Well,
Getting out was
that's
one of the
it.
best decisions I ever made.
uh, with regard to people trying to reach out to you, where can they find you, learn more, anything like that?
I'm on LinkedIn. It's Ivan F. Ingram. I'm also at Golden Compass. That's Ivan at goldencompassllc.com. We also have a website, Golden Compass LLC. Please check that out. That's also on LinkedIn. And then I'm available also at Ivan, IVAN .f Ingraham. That's INGRAHAM at Gmail. So people can reach out, and from there we can have more of a conversation about what's important to them, and maybe there's ways that we at Golden Compass or I can assist in some capacity, provide some
Awesome.
perspective.
Awesome. Well, Ivan, man, it's been great having you on today. I appreciate you coming on, and great stuff, man. Great leadership insights. I really appreciate you coming on. Thank you.
Thank you, Dale. This has been absolutely fantastic.
All right. Thank you. Talk soon.
Yep, you bet.